Well, let's talk about this phone. I use my S25 Ultra since it's launched and I have pretty good idea about its positives and negatives, so let me share them with you. Let's start with the display. Well, I'm happy to announce that unlike the last year's S24 Ultra, I didn't see any kind of grainy display problems with my S25 Ultra unit. So I guess they resolved the Q&A problems regarding that particular issue. However, they are still using an 8-bit display and it is sometimes possible to see color banding, and with this high price point, I think it is well overdue. The second point I want to delve into is the Corning Gorilla Armor 2. So what has changed from last year's Corning Gorilla Armor 1? Well, they say that it is more drop resistance, but I think the most important part is that it is less scratch resistant. So it kinda lost my favorite feature from last year. But apart from that, it is still amazing to use day to day. You basically see no reflections and the perceived contrast of the display is much better. And another thing that contributes to this perceived contrast is the brightness. This phone yet again supports 2600 nits sustained brightness, but there's a caveat. Well, it overheats. And I do mean it. If the brightness of the screen is maxed out for 1 or 2 minutes, it will be dimmed out. Phone cannot keep that brightness. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a sustained brightness, but yeah, I guess in short bursts it is. Okay, what about the software? Well, it comes packed with Android 15 and One UI 7. And I do believe that One UI 7 is, well, the best iteration of One UI. But I have also observed some problems with the software department of Samsung, especially when it comes to timely updates. For example, Android 15 has released last October and the S24 Ultra didn't even got Android 15 update yet. So when they say that they support 7 years of updates and don't even give any updates for months at end, it makes me question their promises. So that is one thing you should be aware of. Another software related thing is Google Gemini. Believe me, I really tried to use Google Gemini and I couldn't find a use for it. Unfortunately, it is basically not for me. And funnily enough, it does some things worse than 15 years old Google Assistant. And I do mean it. And I also want to put some couple of screenshots where it didn't even understand basic instructions and totally failed or give random results. And I still cannot believe that they charge around 22 euros monthly for Google Gemini Premium or whatever it is called. It is simply not worth it. Even in its free form, I don't want to use it anymore. Another thing I want to delve into is Now Brief. They talk so much about it and said that, oh, it requires a powerful NPU, but in reality, it is shit. I have to be honest with you. I also tried to train it. I used it more than 1 month. I'm regularly traveling for my work, consistent or whatever, and it simply has no value. I will also show you some screenshots. It is basically a glorified weather application and a glorified weather application that sends you non-dismissible notifications multiple times a day. So it's basically annoying and I disabled this feature. Okay, what about the specs? Well, as you can expect, phone comes with the latest and greatest Snapdragon 8 Elite and it is paired with 12 gigs of RAM. Even though it seems like enough, all of its competitors are using at least 16 gigs of RAM, and at this point I don't think 12 gigs of RAM is enough because the operating system already takes majority of that space and you're left with roughly 3 or 4 gigabytes of free RAM. And I had multiple times that this device couldn't keep open more than 2 applications at the background. So that is one thing I'm also disappointed with this phone. But what about the performance of the 8 Elite? Well, if you want to see a detailed comparison between the 8 Gen 3 and its benchmark scores, you can watch my video from here. But in general, it performs pretty well, as you can expect. But the stability problems that we encountered last generation also continues with S25 Ultra. It overheats like hell, and it is simply not recommended for extended period of hard work. By extended, I mean more than 15 or 20 minutes. Even though in its throttle state, it is still more powerful than S24 Ultra, don't get me wrong, but Samsung has to figure out how to cool this device better, because you are missing a lot of performance and lefting that performance on the table. Yeah, and when it comes to general day-to-day use, different applications, social media, internet, or whatever, of course, it is just blazing fast. You will not encounter any problem. My criticism only goes for pretty hard usage. But what happens to the battery when you use this device? Well, just like last year, and year before, and year before, and year before, this device is still using 5000 mAh battery, and it is not enough. You can also watch my in-depth battery test between S24 Ultra and S25 Ultra from here. In synthetic test, yes, it outperformed the S24 Ultra, but with a really small margin, and when it comes to real-life usage, it is not that impressive, and it is barely enough for me for one day's use. I mostly charge my phone at least one time at office, so I don't encounter any problems when I'm returning home. Yes, I'm a pretty heavy user and I have a pretty long commute and I listen a lot of music, but still, when you consider this price bracket, I think getting one day easily should be a baseline. And unfortunately, I don't comfortable so that I leave my power bank at home when I'm using S25 Ultra. But on the bright side, the optimization of One UI 7 is pretty well. I cannot deny that, and I have to acknowledge it. Even though it has considerably smaller battery than its competitors, its efficiency is pretty nice, especially standby times. But like I said, when you're using a device, when you're actually using that HN Elite, it drains the battery. Okay, and the last part I want to mention is the cameras. I also created another video comparing the S24 Ultra and S25 Ultra, so you can see the detailed comparison in here, but in general, it is okay. What do you want me to say? The only thing they changed from last year is the wide angle sensor, so the other things are pretty same. Yeah, it's an okay camera system. It is not the best, it is not the worst. It is just okay, it is serviceable. It does everything pretty well, but that's it. And nothing groundbreaking, it doesn't shoot pretty good photos, and also it is still struggles with fast moving objects. The shutter speed of this device is pretty low, and if you're trying to take a picture of a moving object, a child or animal or whatever, it is always going to be blurry. But I also want to say that I really love how small the cutout for the front-facing camera is. That maybe on camera it is not showing pretty well, but I think it makes a huge difference, and I really like that they're keeping that cutout pretty small. Before I give my final verdict, I just want to mention one thing. When I'm saying a phone is bad or good, I don't necessarily mean that for the whole phone ecosystem. I'm comparing it for its price bracket and its market bracket. So when I say that, this phone doesn't have a pretty good camera set, yes, it is still have a pretty nice camera set. Compared to mid-range phones or entry-level phones, it is pretty amazing. But when it's compared to its rivals on the same premium segment, it is mediocre. So that's one thing I want to make clear. And the other thing is, I really don't understand. I cannot justify the price tag of this device. It is retailed at 1,500 euros in Germany, and it is the most expensive Android phone you can buy, excluding the foldable ones, of course. And when you're buying the most expensive Android phone, you expect to get at least one feature to be the best across the board, right? At least have the best display or the best camera or the best speakers. But unfortunately, this phone is mediocre all around, so I simply cannot justify how can this be the most expensive Android phone around. Yes, in the past, my argument was that, well, the software is also a really big part, and when you compare it to some other Chinese brands, Samsung updates more regularly and their software was much more stable. But when I see what happened in the last year, this is no longer the case, so I don't know how they can justify this phone. I still enjoyed using this phone. This is a pretty amazing phone, but it does not worth its price. That's for sure. And it is a really uneventful upgrade from last year, as last year was to S23 Ultra. But whatever, at the end of the day, it is your money, it is your decision, so I cannot say what you have to do. But if you can get this phone with a huge discount, don't think about it, just buy it and you will be really happy. So yeah, please do share me your opinions down in the comment section, and if you have any recommendations for the future, please do let me know. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and as always, take care.